California is holding a dress rehearsal of the nation's first full-scale carbon market, designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and head off climate change. I'm David Gillen for Business Day Live. And Stephanie Rosenblum will take a look at the best shoes for travelers. But first, I'm joined by Chris Easter, the Vice President of California-based First Carbon Solutions. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Great. Hey, thanks for Skyping in from North Carolina today. Quickly, just to remind folks, the idea behind cap and trade, I mean, as I understand it, companies buy and sell permits, which are also called allowances, to emit greenhouse gases, and businesses that reduce their emissions can sell their spare ones, and the cap is lowered over time, hopefully reducing pollution. Sound about right?
Generally, yes. There's also a component where you can implement carbon reduction projects and create emission reduction credits to sell into the market, as well as the allowances. So yes, but the allowance part, absolutely.
Great. Now this auction, this test run out in California, is a couple hours away now, but California's been working on this for years, and millions, possibly billions of dollars that are at stake. I'm wondering how this is going to affect the debate over cap and trade. Not everybody agrees that this is the way to go.
You're breaking up a little bit, but I think the question is what are the implications on a wider basis of the California system?
That's right.
Very closely California's system, and if things go well, you have both detractors and advocates for the system. If they go well, then we could see this on a much broader scale, U.S.-wide. If it doesn't go well, there'll be fingers pointing towards some of the problems with the EUTS as well, and that the cap and trade might not be a viable option. It's critical.
Right. We're not hearing a lot about climate change at the Republican convention down in Tampa. I don't expect we're going to hear much about it at the Democratic convention next week in Charlotte. But there are a lot of people who are wondering about how to cope with this. There is an alternative here, which is a carbon tax. I mean, some economists, some who have actually written in the New York Times, have called for that. I mean, does that make any sense to you?
It's an option, and in fact, a carbon tax on a very small scale is being implemented in some regional air districts in California. But I think the cap and trade is swinging, going for a much more broad program, which will actually provide incentives for going above and beyond in terms of innovatively addressing your carbon footprint and reducing that. So to me, it provides incentives that a carbon tax simply cannot. It'll help move forward some innovative technologies on the alternative energy and also energy efficiency side.
Right. I mean, sounds good. Proponents of cap and trade always point to the success in cap and trade reducing acid rain here in the U.S., which is sulfur dioxide. It's not carbon dioxide or a greenhouse gas. But when the carbon market began in Europe a couple of years ago, 2005, I think, it did not get off to a very smooth start. I mean, in the beginning, it seemed like it was good for polluters, bad for investors, and didn't reduce emissions pretty much at all. What's going to be different about what's happening in California?
Well, they definitely took a long, hard look at that. In fact, there were some delays to make sure that we understood some of the pitfalls in the EUTS system. One of the issues was the wild volatility of the price of a metric ton of carbon on the European market.
Right.
California's addressed that with a $10 floor and a ceiling as well to try to keep the volatility in check. And there's some other items on the financial transactions side, a little bit more complex, that they're looking at implementing as well.
Right. Hey, Chris, thanks a lot. We'll be keeping an eye on this one, as will Wall Street, I think.
Absolutely.
Thanks. And finally, when traveling, the right footwear is essential, and who better to offer advice about the best travel shoes than those who fly for a living? Columnist Stephanie Rosenblum asked flight attendants for their shoe recommendations, and she filed this report.
For my column this week, I wanted to write about comfortable shoes for traveling. And who better to ask for advice than flight attendants, who are on their feet for many hours a day in some of the most extreme work conditions around. And one brand that they recommended almost unanimously was Dansko clogs. And while some flight attendants said that they don't think they're necessarily the most stylish shoes, they are heaven on the feet. I personally like wearing ballet flats by a company called Bloch, which is spelled B-L-O-C-H. But flight attendants will point out that there's not a lot of support in these ballet flats. And one brand that does provide that but still gives you a really cute ballet flat and comes in patent leather are Clarks. There are a lot of ballet flats out on the market nowadays, but you want to make sure when you get a pair that they have some support, that they have some cushioning, because that's going to enable you to walk around and tour a city all day long. But shoes are not just important to women, of course, they're important to men as well. And for tips about that, I turn to Bobby Laurie, who is a flight attendant, a blogger, and the star of his own online series, Savvy Stews.
No, she didn't snap you.
And one of the things Bobby talked to me about was making sure he had shoes that were not only cushioned and comfortable, but also shoes that didn't beep when he moves through security. While you might not love the exact shoes that we're showing you or that the flight attendants themselves are wearing, the point is the brand. For instance, our videographer is wearing sandals by Naturalizer, and she is on her feet all day long. And while flight attendants wouldn't wear sandals, they work for her. And one last tip. Flight attendants recommend changing up your shoes to exercise your feet differently. And at the end of the day, even better, just kick your shoes off.
That's all for today, but keep it here at nytimes.com for our continuing coverage of these and other stories. I'm David Gillen reporting for Business Day Live. Thanks for watching.